What happens when one of America's most beloved television hosts walks? Straight into the most uncomfortable interview of his entire career. Steve Harvey arrived on The View, expecting a friendly conversation. But what unfolded instead became a daytime TV disaster that had viewers everywhere choosing sides. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment telling me which talk show host you think handles conflict best. Because after this, you'll never look at daytime television the same way again, Steve. Harvey stepped onto the set that Tuesday morning with his signature smile, adjusting his suit jacket before settling into the guest chair. The studio audience applauded warmly. Co-hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah N., and Sunny Hostin greeted him with genuine enthusiasm. But at the far end of the table sat Joy Behar, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Steve Harvey, everyone," Whoopi announced as the applause swelled. "Thank you for having me," Steve said, flashing the million-dollar grin that made him a household name. "Always a pleasure to be with you, ladies." But Sarah jumped right in. "Your new relationship book has been flying off the shelves. What inspired you to write another guide for couples?" Steve leaned forward, totally at ease. "You know, Sarah, after decades of hosting Family Feud and talking to thousands of families, I've learned one thing. Communication is everything. When couples stop truly listening to each other, that's when problems start." "That's beautiful," Sunny added, but Joy Behar shifted in her seat. Her expression still hadn't softened. Steve noticed. "Joy, you look like you've got something to say," he joked lightly. Joy's eyes narrowed. "Well, Steve, I've been reading your book, and I have to ask, don't you think it's a little hypocritical for someone who's been married 3 times to be giving relationship advice?" The studio fell silent. The co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Steve's smile flickered for a split second before he recovered. "Joy," he said calmly, "I think my experience is good and bad give me insight into what works and what doesn't. Every relationship teaches us something." "But Steve," Joy pressed, "your first 2 marriages ended in divorce. How can you tell people how to make their marriages work when you couldn't make yours work?" Whoopi tried to intervene. "Joy, I think what Steve is saying is, no, Whoopi. Let him answer." Joy cut her off. "Our viewers deserve to know why they should take advice from someone with that track record." Steve's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed controlled. "Joy, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at. I've been happily married to my wife Marjorie for over 15 years. We've built a beautiful blended family, and yes, I learned from my mistakes. That's what growth looks like. Growth." Joy scoffed. "Or convenient marketing. Funny how your personal struggles turn into best-selling books," the audience murmured. Tension crackled in the air. Sarah looked mortified. Sunny leaned forward as if ready to jump in. But Joy wasn't finished. "And another thing," she continued. "Some of your comedy from the 90s, your material about women, it hasn't exactly aged well. How do we know this book isn't just more outdated thinking?" Steve set down his coffee mug with a firmness that made the table vibrate. "Joy, I came here to help people strengthen their relationships, not to be attacked for jokes I made decades ago. Comedy evolves. People evolve, and I think my reputation speaks for itself." "Does it, though?" Joy shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you profit from giving advice on something you've struggled with your entire life. And frankly, some of your past comments about women make you a questionable source on how they should find love." The other co-host sat frozen. Whoopi attempted once more to save the moment. "Maybe we should talk about the positive feedback." "No," Whoopi, Steve said sharply, an edge creeping into his voice. And that's when everything shifted. "Joy wants to have this conversation," Steve repeated, turning toward her. "Then let's have it. Because right now, you're trying to tear me down in front of millions of viewers. And for what? What exactly is your agenda?" Joy leaned back with a slow, satisfied smirk. "My agenda is truth, Steve. Our viewers deserve to know who they're taking advice from. And honestly, your defensive reaction is pretty telling." "Defensive?" Steve's voice rose just a notch. "You're attacking my character, my marriage, my career, a national television, and you expect me to smile and nod? That's not happening, ladies and gentlemen." Steve Harvey. Everyone, Joy announced sarcastically, gesturing toward him. This is what happens when you ask legitimate questions. He falls apart. Steve pushed back his chair and stood abruptly, the legs scraping harshly against the studio floor. I'm not falling apart, Joy. I'm calling out your unprofessional behavior. This isn't journalism. This is character assassination. The entire room froze. The audience went quiet, some covering their mouths. The other co-hosts sat stiff and stunned, unsure how or whether to intervene. Sit down, Steve, Joy commanded. You're embarrassing yourself? I'm embarrassing myself? Steve let out a bitter laugh. Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me, and I'm the one embarrassing myself? You know what's embarrassing? A grown woman who thinks bullying makes good television. Joy's face flushed red. Bullying? I'm asking legitimate questions, questions any responsible journalist would ask. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be on talk shows. Legitimate questions? Steve shot back. His voice was rising now, echoing across the studio. You didn't ask about my book, my family, my work, my philanthropy, nothing. You skipped all of it and went straight for the throat. That's not journalism. That's a hit job. Oh, please, Joy rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. This is how interviews work in the real world, Steve. We don't hand you softball questions so you can promote your book. Steve pointed at her, his composure finally cracking. Joy, I've done thousands of interviews. I've been on every major network, every major show. I know the difference between tough questions and personal attacks. What you're doing is the latter. Whoopi finally stepped in. Maybe we should take a commercial break? No, Steve interrupted firmly. Joy started this. We're going to finish it right here, right now. Joy crossed her arms, leaning back with a defiant expression. Fine, let's finish it. You want to talk personal attacks? Let's talk about the fact that you made a career out of stereotyping women. Now you're trying to rebrand yourself as some relationship guru. The hypocrisy is stunning. Steve's hands clenched at his sides. Joy, you clearly have some personal issue with me because this level of hostility isn't normal. Did I offend you somehow? Say something at an industry event. Because this feels very personal. Don't flatter yourself, Joy snapped. This isn't personal. This is about accountability. You can't just reinvent yourself and expect everyone to forget your past. My past? Steve repeated, incredulous. Joy, my past includes growing up homeless, sleeping in my car, working my way up from nothing to build a media empire that employs hundreds of people. My past includes giving millions to charity and mentoring young comedians. But you want to focus on jokes I told 30 years ago. Joy waved a dismissive hand. Oh, here comes the sob story. Steve, plenty of people overcome adversity without making degrading comments about women in the process. Sarah finally tried to intervene, her voice trembling. Joy, I think maybe we should stay out of this, Sarah, Joy snapped. Steve wants to have this conversation. Steve stepped closer to the table, his voice rising with each sentence. You know what, Joy? You're right. I do want to have this conversation. Because I'm tired of people like you who think tearing down an entire life's work is justified because you didn't like some jokes told decades ago. I've apologized for anything inappropriate. I've grown, Steve said, voice firm. I've evolved. But that's not enough for people like you, is it? People like me? Joy's eyebrows shot up. What exactly do you mean by that, Steve? I mean people so miserable in their own lives they have to tear others down just to feel powerful. Steve didn't hesitate. You're sitting here on national television trying to humiliate me because what? It makes you feel important? The audience gasped, a collective inhale of shock. Joy's face went crimson. How dare you? You don't know anything about my life? I know enough, Steve shot back. I know happy people don't go out of their way to tear others apart. I know secure people don't ambush guests on their own show. And I know professional journalists don't turn interviews into a circus because of personal grudges. Joy slammed her hand against the table. You want to talk about a circus? You're the one standing up, screaming like a child who didn't get his way. I'm standing because you've disrespected me for 15 straight minutes. Steve roared. You think sitting behind that desk gives you a license to say whatever you want? You think you can attack my character, my marriage, my career, and I'm supposed to smile and say thank you? Whoopi tried to intervene. Everybody just take a breath. No, Whoopi. Steve turned toward her, calm but blazing. I appreciate you trying to help, but I need to say this. Joy planned this ambush the moment I walked into this studio. This wasn't about tough questions. It was about humiliation. Joy leaned forward, eyes sharp. Nobody planned anything, Steve. You're paranoid. I asked you legitimate questions about your credibility, and you completely melted down. This, she gestured at him, is exactly why people question your advice. My credibility? Steve laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Joy, what's your credibility? What relationships have you saved? What families have you helped? What positive impact have you made on anyone's life? All you do is sit behind that desk and tear people down for entertainment. I'm a journalist. Joy shouted back. I hold people accountable. You're not a journalist, Steve exploded. You're a talk show host with an attitude problem. Real journalists ask tough questions with respect. They don't ambush their guests and then act shocked when someone pushes back. The studio was chaos, now audience whispering. Phones discreetly raised, co-hosts frozen in dread. Joy stood too, squaring off with him across the table. You know what your real problem is, Steve? You can't handle being challenged by a woman. That's what this is about. Steve's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you serious right now? Joy, the strongest people in my life are women. My wife, my daughters, my mother who raised me. This has nothing to do with your gender. It has everything to do with you being unprofessional and nasty. Nasty? Joy's voice cracked into a higher register. I'm nasty for asking hard questions. You're nasty for the way you ask them, Steve countered. You didn't ask hard questions. You made accusations. You didn't conduct an interview. You launched an attack. And now you're making it about gender because you know you've crossed the line. I didn't cross anything, Joy screamed. You came here expecting us to fawn over you and promote your book. And when I asked real questions, you fell apart. Real questions? Steve looked stunned. Joy, your first question called me a hypocrite. Your second attacked my past marriages. Your third dragged up jokes from the 90s. Those weren't questions, they were landmines. Sonny tried, timidly, to interrupt. Maybe we should all just don't tell me to calm down. Both Steve and Joy snapped at the same time and glared daggers at each other. This is unbelievable, Steve muttered, running a hand through his hair. I came here to talk about helping couples communicate. Instead, I'm getting attacked by someone who clearly has no idea how to have a respectful conversation. Joy jabbed a finger toward him. The only disrespectful person here is you. You're the one who started yelling. You're the one who made this personal? I made this personal? Steve's voice cracked in disbelief. Joy, you opened this interview by questioning my character. How is that not personal? Because it's relevant to what you're selling? Joy snapped. If you're going to give relationship advice, people have a right to know your relationship history. Steve stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Fine. Steve threw his hands up in disbelief. Then ask about it professionally, he snapped. Don't start an interview by calling someone a hypocrite. Don't drag up their past marriages just to embarrass them. Ask real questions with respect. I don't owe you respect, Joy shot back instantly. You earn respect. The studio froze. Even Joy seemed to realize she'd stepped over a line, but the words were already hanging there, echoing through the room. Steve stared at her, breathing hard, jaw tight. You know what, Joy? He said, his voice suddenly quiet. Dangerous quiet. You just told me on national television in front of millions of viewers that you don't owe me basic human respect. And you wonder why I'm upset? Joy shifted, swallowing hard, but she doubled down anyway. I meant you have to earn my professional respect as a guest. No. Steve shook his head slowly. That's not what you said. You said you don't owe me respect, period. And that tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. A hush fell over the studio. Could hear the cameras humming. Joy's face had gone pale as the weight of her statement settled in. But instead of walking it back, she chose confrontation. Don't twist my words. Steve, she insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. You know what I meant? Steve turned away from her and looked directly into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, watching at home, he said clearly, you just heard Joy Behar say, she doesn't owe me respect. Not courtesy, not kindness, just respect as a human being. And I want you to remember that the next time someone tells you bullying is wrong, oh, stop being so dramatic, Joy snapped. But Steve wasn't done. You want to know what's dramatic, Joy? He said, stepping toward the table. Dramatic is ambushing a guest on your show. As dramatic is digging into someone's personal life to discredit their professional work. Dramatic is sitting behind that desk like your judge and jury, deciding who deserves basic decency. Joy's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. My job, she began. Your job. Steve laughed, the sound cold and sharp. Joy, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I know what good journalism looks like. I know what professional interviews look like. And this, he gestured around the set, ain't it? Whoopi made one last desperate attempt to de-escalate. Steve, maybe we can start over. But Steve held up a hand. Whoopi, I respect you. I respect Sarah. I respect Sunny. You ladies are professionals. But I will not sit here and be disrespected by someone who thinks tearing people down is entertainment. Joy stood abruptly, face burning red. Nobody's tearing you down. You're being overly sensitive. Overly sensitive, Steve roared. Joy, you spent 20 minutes attacking my character, my marriages, my career, my past. And I'm overly sensitive for defending myself. Are you listening to yourself? I asked you legitimate questions? Joy shouted back. No, you didn't. Steve exploded. A legitimate question would be, Steve, how do your past experiences inform your current relationship advice? But what you said was, isn't it hypocritical for someone who's been married 3 times to give relationship advice? Do you see the difference? Yes. Joy's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, utterly lost for words. And another legitimate question, Steve continued, would be, Steve, how has your comedy evolved over the years? But what you said was, your old material is dated and makes you the wrong person to give women advice. That's not journalism. Joy, that's a hit job. Was holding you accountable. Joy finally managed to say, accountable for what? Steve demanded. For growing as a person? For learning from my mistakes? For building a successful career and a happy marriage? For helping millions of people through my work? Steve asked, incredulous. What exactly am I supposed to be accountable for? 1, Joy blurted, pointing at him with a trembling hand. 1, for your past comments. 2, for your previous marriages. 3, for profiting off relationship advice. And there it is. Steve cut her off, pointing at her triumphantly. You just admitted it. You're not holding me accountable for anything I've done wrong. You're holding me accountable for living my life, for having a past, for making mistakes, for learning from them. The audience didn't make a sound. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, waiting. Steve turned to the other co-hosts. Ladies, I want to apologize to you and to your viewers for what this has become. I came here in good faith to talk about something I'm passionate about, helping people build better relationships. I never expected to be ambushed. Don't apologize for me, Joy snapped. Steve whirled back around, eyes burning. I'm not apologizing for you, Joy. I'm apologizing to everyone else who just watched your unprofessional behavior. He stepped closer. You want to know what real accountability looks like? It looks like admitting when you're wrong. It looks like treating people with respect, even when you disagree. It looks like asking tough questions without resorting to personal attacks. I don't need lessons from you on how to do my job. Joy's voice cracked, rising into a shrill register. Clearly you do, Steve fired back. Because whatever this was today, it wasn't journalism. It wasn't entertaining. And it sure wasn't professional. It was mean-spirited and ugly. How dare you? Joy screamed. How dare I what? Steve demanded. How dare I defend myself? How dare I call out your behavior? How dare I refuse to be your punching bag? Which one of those, Joy, bothers you the most? Joy was breathing fast, practically hyperventilating. You're trying to make me look bad? Steve stared at her, stunned. Joy, I don't have to make you look bad. You're doing that all by yourself. Every word you say is digging the hole deeper. Every insult, every attack, every unprofessional remark is showing this audience exactly who you are. I know who I am, Joy shrieked. Do you? Steve asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who gets satisfaction from hurting other people. Someone who thinks cruelty equals strength. Someone who's forgotten there's a human being on the other side of your attacks. Joy's eyes shimmered not with sadness, but with pure rage. I am not cruel. Then prove it, Steve challenged. Apologize. Show the audience you can admit when you've gone too far. Show them that underneath all the anger, there's still a decent person somewhere in there. The studio went dead silent. You could hear someone cough in the back row. Everyone watched Joy, waiting, hoping to see what she'd do. For a moment, it looked like she might actually apologize, but then she crossed her arms, chin jutting forward. I have nothing to apologize for. Steve nodded slowly, as if the final piece had clicked into place. And there it is, folks. Joy Behar's, someone who believes basic human decency is optional. That professional courtesy is a suggestion. That being right is more important than being kind. Get out, Joy screamed. Just get out. For the first time since the interview began, Steve smiled, but it wasn't warm. Gladly, he said. But before I go, Joy, let me leave you with one last thought. You've spent the last 30 minutes trying to tear me down, trying to embarrass me, trying to make me look bad. Paused at the edge of the stage and looked back at her. But all you've done is show everyone watching exactly who you really are, and I feel sorry for you. I don't want your pity. Joy shouted, voice cracking. It's not pity, Steve said softly. It's compassion. Because anyone who hurts others just to feel powerful is someone who's clearly hurting inside, and I hope you get the help you need. With that, Steve Harvey walked off the view set, leaving behind a stunned audience, horrified co-hosts, and Joy Behar standing alone, shaking with rage and humiliation. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. And one thing was undeniable. This wasn't just an interview gone wrong. It was a full-scale meltdown, broadcast live to millions. One that would change how people saw both Steve Harvey and Joy Behar forever. When the doors closed behind him, the silence was overwhelming. Joy stood at the table, chest heaving, realizing too late that in trying to destroy her guest, she'd only exposed something ugly about herself, something she could never take back. And that was the day Steve Harvey walked away, leaving Joy Behar to face the consequences of her own actions in front of the entire world.